Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for having me. I'm Diahnna Nicole Baxter, transformational life coach, Kundalini yogi, and Emmy-winning actress, and just grateful to be here during this very challenging time and to be having, conversations and difficult conversations and finding ways to hopefully start healing in the process.
Yeah, awesome. So I brought Diahnna on because we are in a coaching container where we get really vulnerable and we share some really juicy stuff, juicy work that we do. And I noticed that she really is one of the people that really cultivates this energy inside of her. And and I thought, what a perfect way to bring on a woman who works with women of color. Ooh, that's my favorite juicy spot. So we're going to get into, just get started. We're going to talk about the trauma to transformation. Like, what did that look like when you first got started, when you were healing your trauma?
Looked very messy. I think a lot of us, I think everybody has had some kind of traumatic experience, right? So what we don't realize is that we really carry those experiences in our cellular memory, right? We carry it in our bodies. So for me, that showed up in different ways. Trauma just from being a person of color in this country, trauma from ancestral lines that we absolutely can heal, yes. Trauma from witnessing a lot of violence growing up, trauma from, I could go on and on. We all could, right? And, my journey in healing really started with seeking beyond Christianity. I could never understand why, my grandparents, who are amazing human beings and who grew up in the South, Jim Crow. Anyhow, I would just see these white pictures of Jesus and it just enraged me because I would see what was going on in the world and I just didn't, so as a child, I couldn't understand that. I could respect the faith and this deep faith and the believing and could feel the spirit, but I just couldn't. So anyhow, I really started researching other religions. When I went to college, I went to Duke, which was a whole nother lesson in oppression. Duke was a great education, but at the time, it was a big plantation in itself. That's a whole nother conversation. But I promised myself, I was like, I'm going to learn about everything I want to learn about. I had a lot of anger. I was like, I'm not going to ever read another book written by a white man. And I majored in African-American/African studies, and I minored in women's studies. So everything I was ingesting was from women of color. And I relearned my history. I learned my history and really started diving into self-help books and spiritual practices.
Let's talk about the deprogramming, because you mentioned you learned your history. So what did you mean by you learned your history?
When I say I learned my history, what did I mean by that? Sorry. So when I say I learned my history, I learned that Christopher Columbus did not discover America. I learned that, my history did not start as a slave. I learned that there was a whole continent where I still can't necessarily trace back my roots and my mother tongue. I learned that I come from regal, powerful, brilliant people. And we don't see that growing up. We're not taught that in schools, in public schools. We get 1.5 pages about slavery, and that's about all we get as a reflection of who we are. So I really got to dive into the truth.
The craziest part is that now that we have mixed races,
yes,
people are really losing their history. So you might see a person who appears that they are Black and they're mixed with something, and they might act act, like people say, act white, which is, I hate even saying act white, because what does that mean? Proper? You act white by American standards. Because why? Because you're clean cut, because you're proper, because you hold yourself upright, because you're glowing. Like, what? Yeah. No, Black people can glow in their skin. Like, they don't need to be white to be beautiful. And I had that with my daughter. And my daughters used to tell me, you're more prettier than me because you're white. And I was like, ooh, no, baby. And I didn't know how to do their hair. That was a whole other thing. And I got shamed by a bunch of Black women for not knowing. And I was honest. I just don't know. I mean, it's matted up. I don't know. I don't know how to do it. And so after a while of going to the salon and getting beat up by these women, I just took it. I took it like a man. And
took it like a woman.
Eventually, exactly. I eventually gave it to them to do. And I finally like empowered my children. Yeah, let's talk about the opportunity for healing. And healing's messy. So yeah, let's just see what that looks like right now.
So there is an opportunity for healing right now. This time it's different. It feels different. There's lots of conversations that are starting to happen that I did not see before, with Trayvon Martin, with Eric Garner, with, I could go on and on naming names. But I'm seeing on social media, I'm seeing more conversations happening between white people coming forward, owning their own colonization of their minds. And that's really what needs to happen. And that's why, you know, I call white women forward. Because at the end of the day, racism is not people of color's legacy. We didn't create it. White, the term white was created to ensure that slavery continued. Because you'll hear a lot of arguments come up, well, my ancestors were Irish and they weren't treated right, and and all of this, which is just another form of bias, by the way. That's not to say that your ancestors don't have a history, but they did not have the same experience. They were not slaves. And white was formed to bring all of the immigrants together of European descent under the same colonization of the mind, so that they could place other and subhuman of brown, Black, and indigenous people in order to ensure that they were able to keep their economic slavery-based labor force. So it's a lie. White, Black, all of it's a lie. So what's happening now, and I just take a moment to give thanks to George Floyd, because in a lot of ways he sacrificed his life for this moment. There's been so much bloodshed, so many sacrifices, and there will be more, because rebirth is messy and it's bloody and it's shitty. But I give thanks to him because there is a great awakening happening in this time. We are in the year 2020, the year of perfect vision. The veil has been lifted. There is nowhere to hide. And we're in the midst of Corona, right? Which does what? It taxes the blood system. It attacks the lungs. Lungs spiritually hold grief. It is the time right now where the veil is lifted. There's no more hiding. This has been going on for 400 years plus. There's just cameras now. And there's no longer the space to not do something. Because you see, as Black people and people of color, we've been dealing with this for centuries. We're some of the most compassionate people in the world. It is white women's responsibility to come forward, own their privilege, and use it. And especially liberal white women, because I honestly believe that a lot of liberal white women are probably the most racist, even more racist than the Southern white women. Because if you're living in this country, if you were born in this country, you have been programmed to fear Black bodies, to see them as subhuman in some way, shape, or form, And if you've never been in communities where you sit with Black families, where you actually have loved a Black person, you probably don't see them as equals. It's not even intentional, it's programming. So we have an opportunity right now to really be honest about how we've been programmed, really have those honest conversations, step up, take action, and then we can start the process of decolonizing the mind and going into the body to start to release it from the body, releasing the shame, releasing the anger, releasing and cutting cords with the ancestral trauma, the epigenetics that has been passed down because of all the bloodshed. So when if you go to one of my pages, you'll see, like, I keep calling white women forward. That is not to shame white women. But white women are the mothers, the sisters, the aunts, the wives of these white baby boys and men. And I believe women are more powerful than men. What do I mean by that? Woman is creator. We have the power. We hold the wombs that are the highest technology in the world to bring forth human life. So our intuition, our way to actually open the heart, there's nothing beyond God except women. So white women have the power to really, really touch the hearts of the men in their communities, to really, really own their privilege and start to take action. And that's why I keep calling white women forward. And if people are more scared of being called a racist or more enraged about being called a racist than they are enraged about witnessing a Black man die, then that you are the root of the problem. It's time to get out of your small egos, stop being worried about being called whatever, and start seeing as a human being so that we can collectively heal on this planet. Because this goes beyond America. Everywhere you go, darker skin is considered less than, everywhere. I remember when I went to Cairo, I studied abroad in Cairo. And like I think I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of anger coming into college. I never wanted to read another book by a white man. I dove into African-American history, women's studies. And so I went to Cairo thinking, I'm going back to the motherland. I'm going back to the roots of Egyptian civilization. And I get there, and I was staying in what they call it a hostel, but it was the dorms for AmeriKKKa, the American University in Cairo. I was very interested in Islam as a possible spiritual practice at the time. And men and women were segregated there. So we had a common area where you could sit with each other. And I was sitting there, I was like, I really want to go out dancing. Where can I find some hip hop out here? And the man looked at me, he was like, you got to go where all the niggers go. And this is an Egyptian man saying this. And I looked at him and I said, who are the niggers? And he was like, the Sudanese. And I was like, well, I definitely want to go and learn more here. I said, you know what they call you in my country? They call you a sand nigger. So I'm bringing all that up to say is that this disease, this lie of white supremacy is spread throughout the world. And what's happening here right now is really presenting an opportunity for us to be radically honest, heal, and then from there we can start to envision the possibilities of what it looks like to live in a world where everyone is treated like a human being. And then start to work on deep forgiveness that needs to happen on all sides. So.
Yes. So that was so good. And it literally brought up a story that I'm going to talk to you about, because I don't fear being called a racist, because my kids have called me racist more times than I can imagine, and I've worked through it. And yeah, they got to see my programming and I got to get rid of that. Yeah. I actually, years ago, there's a lot of people that are still here. They need to evolve from it. I was like, what about Black on Black crimes? What about that? We need to, you're going to evolve from that. If you're there now, you will evolve from that. You will. It was a process for me. I definitely was like a no Black Lives Matter. They got to figure it out themselves last time. It was like literally like 4 or 5 years ago. I was like, figure it out, guys. Y'all created the problem. And then I was like, ooh, maybe not. Like, maybe that's not going to fix the problem. And so I think what was fueling that was the hurt from a relationship I had. Here's the problem. If you only know a few Black people, and because you're not surrounded by them, and everything you see is either on the media or TV, and that's all you know about Black folks because you're just not around them. If you say, I have a couple Black friends, you don't know a lot of Black people. I'm just going to say that.
True.
So I have a son. My son is 4. And the little story about him is I got pregnant by his dad, and I had no idea that the guy was on meth, because that is not, it usually is a white thing, but that's not something that I am familiar with. So when he had this behavior, I thought, what kind of weed is he smoking? I had no idea. But I would go over to his family's house, which was the most important part. His family in San Antonio was so much like my white family in the Valley. Like literally the same. We cook the same types of food. We hang out the same. Like family feels like family. It just felt like, and my kids loved it. They're like, we love his family. And that's the reason I stayed with him, because I felt this connection. I felt like we are the same person. But he'd been to prison before. Mm-hmm. And so I thought military, prison, same mentality. Kind of, not really. And what happened was I started using the N-word around him. And because he was really acting weird. And to me, it was that N-word behavior. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you something? And I would say the N-word, and it would just slip out. And he was like, one time, I will slap you. And I'm like, I don't know why this keeps coming up, but this guy is like, he had hit women before. So I was like, I really don't want to make him mad, but I can't stop. And so eventually he ended up getting in trouble and going to prison. But my whole journey with him has been so like, did I pick the wrong person, or am I judging him, or what is it? Because he's in prison now. And so people look at me and say, that's why you got to raise another kid, because you got with the Black man. And so I ended up a single mom again. It's like, guys, I don't know what happened between that, but definitely there was a cultural difference. And I was definitely he was hitting a wound on me for sure. Something was happening, because I don't even say that word. So for me to use that word, like, I feel like when people use that word, it's hitting a wound, like it's hitting a programming something. So I don't know.
Yes, when people use that word, you know, what you were just saying about that came out. That's a weapon. Because it's a weapon.
It's a weapon.
That word is a weapon. Because that word entails not just a word, a whole history. When I hear that word, I literally see a Black man hanging from a tree with a group of white people around with smiles on their faces. That word is a weapon. So at some point, like I said, within the programming, or perhaps in your family, that word was heard or used. So when that man was pissing you off or threatening you or what have you, it sounds like it wasn't a healthy relationship, period. But when that man was doing those things, that was your way of, boom, I have more power than you. At the end of the day, you could have called the cops and said a Black man is yelling at me, or I'm scared, and they would have came, and who knows what would have happened. It's just like what just happened in the park with, I don't know her name, where she almost killed her dog and threatened the Black man by saying, I'm going to call the police and tell them a Black man is threatening. That's another reason why I'm calling white woman forward, because since day one, Emmett Till whistles at a white woman, supposedly, and ends up lynched. The first film ever shown in the White House, Birth of a Nation, is about a coon who threatened a white woman. And the KKK comes in and lynches him. That's the first film that was shown in the White House. In film history, it's known as one of the most brilliant uses of film in the beginning. These are stories that have been perpetuating violence on Black bodies since day one. So when a white woman uses that word, or when that comes out of you, that literally is cellular memory as well of the power that you have had because of your privilege in the past of being able to snuff his life out at any moment you want. So that word, and there'll be discussions about, well, you guys use it in your music and da 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 da. I'm not even going to get into that conversation because that's once again another way of bypassing. But that word is violent.
If there's a white person that comes together with a Black person and it's not a harmonious relationship, now they get a bad, I guess, taste in their mouth of like, my God, I just wanted to like see something different. Because I think for me, honestly, if I'm getting down to it, I was abused by a white man. So I chose Black people, maybe as like a fuck you, or maybe as I just want something different. And I didn't get something different. It's all the same. And maybe that's where we're getting to. I got the same as I did when I was a kid, another abuser. And there's abusers from every race. So I see it now. Like I'm clearly seeing in this conversation that word was really the only power I had over him. And it's because I'm seeing Black people are so powerful. And I didn't know what to do. Honestly, I was like, Mama, you got to get him. I told his mama, you got to get him. He is the devil. I don't know what's going on. And just because you don't understand something doesn't make it the devil.
Right.
So I didn't understand it. I don't understand the pain that caused him to do what he do to land him in prison again. But, he's a thief. He steals a lot. So I don't know if that is, and that's another thing I want to talk about is like what happens when there is a rap sheet like that, because the new thing is there is slavery still. It's happening in prisons.
It's dangerous to start, once again, we're buying into the colonization of the mind. We start to talk about, or, your question about why is it, or what happens for someone to get to that point, or Black men in the prison system and all of that. Once again, we're like sweeping a narrative about Black men being violent, abusive, criminals, which just is not true. I can't speak on your child's father because I don't know his history.
Oh, you know what? Here's another thing. I'm trying to connect this. Oh, this is so good. I love you. I'm so happy we get to do this. I went to Chicago last year for sexual trauma, military sexual trauma. There were about a group of 20, and 90% of them had been raped by a Black man, including myself. So I just have these connections that I keep making, and I know it's got to be this colonization of the mind. But for that to happen, I'm like, why in the Navy, it was mostly Navy and Army, are people being raped? Like, I just don't get it. My first child was a date rape from the Navy. He wasn't a Black African-American. He was an African, like from Nigeria. So, I mean, this has just been a thing that has just been perpetuating, like, and how do we separate it is what I'm saying. Like, how do we separate it?
How do you separate it? Because to me, what I'm hearing is that for you personally,
okay,
there is a narrative, a story, and actual factual experiences for you. I'm not dismissing your trauma, but that there's a narrative and story around Black men are not safe. They're rapists. There's a higher percentage of them raping than white men. There's, that's what I'm hearing.
Right. I hear you. And I hear myself saying it. And it's because it literally is my own personal experience that I've had. And it's because I haven't had a white boyfriend in a long time.
Why is that?
So maybe that's part of it. Huh?
Why is that, do you think?
I never wanted to see a white penis because, of my sexual abuse when I was little. So I went the other direction, and then I found myself in a world I didn't understand. It looked the same, but there were some things that were just different that I couldn't, like, for instance, the languaging. I think that's a big part of it. I didn't understand the languaging. He used to call me names and stuff that I didn't understand. Like, I didn't grow up learning the word mark and different things. Like, and that's also the same for you. You might not understand, like, the hood language, right?
No, I do. I know.
You do. I don't get it.
Yeah,
I didn't understand.
No, I know hood language. I'm pausing because these conversations are necessary, but it's really dangerous to keep espousing that there's more difference, right?
Right.
Because that is part of the foundation of the lie. Yes, there are different experiences, and Black people, I have a different experience than my mother had. My mother is a darker skinned Black woman with kinky hair. When I was a teenager, we would go to the mall, I would walk in a store and get greeted. She would get followed. I have even a different level of privilege, having lighter skin than my mother does. My experience is different than my mother's experience. Collectively, of the trauma of our ancestral trauma, absolutely. Similar experience. But the Black men that you have allowed in your life that have been violent to you are not representative of all Black men. It sounds like there was a lot of connection energetically of deep wounds between you and these partners. And I invite you to possibly look even past his behavior, not excusing his behavior, but look past his behavior to understand what trauma happened to him for him to get to the point that he did with you. Because it's your responsibility when it comes to how you're going to talk to your children about their fathers. If you're passing on the hatred, the rage, the anger of Black men aren't safe, Black men are this, that's the part of them that is Black. Your experience of Black men has been traumatic.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, you're limiting yourself as far as what else you can have, like,
let's just get real. My experience with men has been traumatizing because white men was traumatizing for me. And yeah, so it's not about race. It really isn't about race. It's so cool that we can literally come to this point that it's kind of untangling it, right?
Yes,
because
that's what has to be done. There's so much to unpack. So much to unpack. And until everybody's really ready to own their white supremacist within.
Yep.
I was listening to Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith earlier this morning, and he had a few different speakers on, and he had Diahnna Van Zandt on, who I love. But she said something about healing in this time, and she talked about looking within. Where do you have your knee on someone's neck? Who has their knee on your neck? Or what circumstance, or what thought patterns, or what belief systems? But more importantly, where is your knee on someone's neck? So we go deeper with all of this to really own the part of us that acts out of the space of hatred. Because until that's healed, it's going to just be a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And it's going to get a little bloodier, I think. I'm not trying to project pain, but rebirth is messy and it's bloody. But that's, I know.
It's good. And you know what? You know what's so cool about having these conversations? We love each other and it still gets clicky. It still gets like, ouch. Really?
Of course.
Yeah, and then people get scared. They're going to be judged. You're being judged anyway. So speak your truth, boo.
Exactly.
A book that really helped me? Maston has a book called Claim Your Power. And when I finished this cycle of that book, at the end of the book, you know who had their knee on my neck? The white man. Like, I didn't have permission from the white man to succeed. And it was as a woman. And so we know that there's always a correlation between racism and feminism. Like, there's some type of correlation. And for some reason, we can never do it at the same time. Like, somebody has to go first. Like, the feminists go, and then tell me about it. You say, yeah, I know, you're ready for this.
I was like, yes, because well, what I just heard you say, there's always been, this correlation between racism and feminism.
Mm-hmm.
And they never seem to come at the same time. My experience as a Black woman, and as I prefer to call myself a womanist, but feminist, is very different than a white woman's experience. When white women were marching to get rights to be treated equal and get equal pay, Black women were not part of that conversation.
Wow.
We're not part of that conversation.
What?
You know what I'm saying? And we're going to choose. I can't unchoose my Blackness. There's no separation of racism and feminism in me. They're intertwined. So, once again, how do I say this? Black women and women of color in general have always taken care of white babies, right? So since the beginning of this country, we have, raised a lot of these babies in Master's house. They have suckled from our tits. We have given them the milk that was supposed to be our children's, who were sold to another fucking slave master to feed their children. So it reminds me of the election with Hillary and how many white women on my feed were so upset that Hillary didn't win. And I get it. I didn't want Trump to win. I voted for Hillary. I didn't necessarily want her either. However, there was no outrage prior to that with all the murders that were going on with Black men. There was no outrage, until people are outraged about human life, period, being treated as if it is not deserving of its civil rights, there's not going to be any change. White women have rarely included women of color or queer women in the conversation about what rights look like for us. It's just not been included. So, and even when once again, they are the brothers, the sisters, they are the sisters, the wives, the aunts, the mothers. They have the access to these men to shift their hearts and to shift the power. It's never separate for women of color.
I even feel the same way about sexual abuse. This is all abuse is abuse, right? And people want to highlight what's happening in Hollywood. Awesome. But most people in their homes, families now have somebody who's been sexually abused, and they get ousted. They either become the scapegoat or something. And so as you're talking about, we are the daughters and the whatever, I'm like, ugh, I almost feel bad that I cut my whole family off for being racist. We grew up racist, so I didn't want my kids around them. So I cut them off. And there was a time where I thought, let me bring my kids around so they know there's some good Black people, or, let me help close the gap. And then I didn't want my kids to have to go through that. I'm like, absolutely not. I will not put my kids in a harm's way where they get called something. I had a grandpa that said, I just have to say everything these mean people say. But he said, I don't hate Black people. I think everybody should own 2 or 3. And I'm like, no, grandpa, why? No. And this is just their mentality. And they think it's funny and a joke. And thank God that generation's dying off. They are dying off. But it is a generational curse that if we don't step in and we don't make the change. So that's why it's important we have this conversation. So what do you want? What do you think we need to do as white women? What if we don't talk to our families? What if we are estranged from our families? How can we be the support for that? Because a lot of people have estranged from their families for racism.
That's true. And I think that it's important to have healthy boundaries. I'm not asking people to put themselves in harm's way or into toxic environments. But having these difficult conversations is the beginning. And then really doing your own digging on history to own the truth of what the history is in this country. And then to take a deep look in the mirror about your own racism and own it and start to publicly talk about that. Publicly talking about, oh, I did notice that I tensed up when well, it's different with COVID now, but when a Black man was walking behind me in the street, I got fearful, but later a white man was and I wasn't, or later, really being honest with yourself about your programming.
Yeah.
And if you are still speaking to your family and around those situations, not to laugh with the jokes, not to be silent when you should speak up, and get involved in your communities. Be just as outraged about someone being murdered than you are about posting about pit bulls getting torn up in dog fights.
Ugh.
You're more concerned about, and listen, I have a dog. I love animals. All, may all living sentient beings be protected. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying there's more outrage when an animal is hurt than there is when a Black man or a Black woman is killed. So I also like to say that it's not my job to teach white women what to do. It's not my legacy. It's not my job. It's time for y'all to do the work, and some of you are. I'm not, but it's going to take that in order to have a collective healing. Because as Black folks, the fact that we're still here, we've been doing our work. We have a lot of work to do with ourselves and our own communities, yes. But we've been doing our work. We're still here. The fact that we're still alive, we've been doing our work. So, and sometimes it takes people imagining that instead of George Floyd, it was their white uncle or their, a lot of people, when even they see Black bodies, it doesn't register to them that is an actual person, a brother, an uncle, a son. They don't even see, they've done studies around that. So the programming, the colonization of the mind is so deep. And that's where we have to start. And then to really start opening our hearts, being courageous with our vulnerability, asking even the questions you were asking. You're being honest.
And it sucks. It's going to suck because we sound ignorant as fuck. And we are. We are. I am ignorant. I'm owning it. I'm ignorant. I don't know. And I'll tell you, there was a time where I couldn't see myself in my own children. And it bothered me. Because how do I love this child that doesn't look like me? How come my sister has a kid that looks just like her and now she gets to love her inner child? I didn't even get to love my inner child and I got to love another child that doesn't look like me. It was so confusing. And now, and until I just kept picking at that thing. Why did they have to look like you to love them? Why do they have to look like you to love them? I picked at that thing until it wasn't a sore anymore. And now people tell me, you and your daughter look so much alike. And I'm like, we do? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I think when people can start doing that, exactly, seeing other people as themselves, it doesn't matter what they look like. They're still, you're literally looking in a mirror anyway.
Yeah, you are. And once again, like you said, you picked at it. Why did that bother you? Because you've been programmed to believe that white is prettier, white is more beautiful, white is more human. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Programmed to believe that. We've all been programmed to believe that.
And on top of that, if you have any type of deep trauma and you haven't done the work on that trauma, this is compound trauma right here. It's just, this is complex ain't even the word for it anymore. It's what the heck? Yep. Yeah. When you haven't done your own inner child work and you haven't loved your child inside of you yet, loving another child that doesn't look like you, loving another person that doesn't look like you is going to be super difficult. Super difficult.
Yeah, you have to do the inner work first. That's why I was like, you got to start with yourself, being really honest with yourself about.
So, so I want to talk about, you work with women of color in your coaching program.
Yes.
And it was no coincidence that you were second on my list. I literally have three people of color lined up for the beginning. It's perfect. It was all perfect. And that's when I knew we had to shift the conversation. And I'm like, okay, so you work with overachievers, women of color overachievers who are good at getting things done. And why don't they feel fulfilled?
Well, I obviously am their mirror, right? I've been there as an overachiever. I've been there as someone who was always valuing or placing my worth on my achievements. And some of that also, too, is wrapped in the racist narrative of, we're taught from a very young age, you don't ever let them see you sweat. You've got to work 10 times as hard in order to get anywhere. And, just you have to show up differently because you are being measured differently, right? My mother, when we moved to San Diego, and I went to 2 different high schools. The second high school I went to had more money. It was predominantly Jewish. And, I had straight A's, and they wouldn't let me in the AP class. I was sitting there with my counselor, and they were like, yeah, well, our school's a little bit different. She probably isn't up to the level, and she's a VEEP student, right? VEEP stood for all the Black kids that are bussed in. So automatically, even that thought process was like, she's Black, she's not smart enough, we're not even going to put her in the class. And my mom was like, no, you're putting her in the class, in the AP class, and if for some reason, which will not happen, that she can't handle it, we'll take her out. But you're not going to automatically condemn her and say that she can't handle this level of education. And luckily, I had a mom that was able to come down to the school and do that. A lot of moms they can't jump off work and come, So I had a mom that was willing to fight for me. So I'm getting lost here. But so working with women called overachievers. So, a lot of my identity was rooted in, see, I'm a straight A student. See, I got into Duke University. See, I won an Emmy. See, this. But I was not really coming from a place of enjoying the journey at all. And that is also a deeply rooted white patriarchal approach to life. About get, achieve, climb the ladder, prove your worth. It's a competitive world, like all of those thought processes. So what I love to do is work with women who have thrived despite their trauma and that are much more interested in fully living than just surviving. And when I say just surviving, I don't mean necessarily financially. A lot of them are very successful, but just because you make a lot of money doesn't mean you're happy. And as women, especially women of color, we have to return to our bodies. We have to start doing the work to really start to release trauma from our bodies, really releasing the overachiever mindset that constantly was measuring ourselves based on a measuring stick of white supremacy, because we had to work 10 times as harder to be seen by that white teacher, this institution, or be accepted. Fuck all of that. And really go within to find what we desire. Not what we should be doing, not how we should be seen, but what we desire. And it's really important to create safe spaces for that to happen. Meaning, if I have a container of women of color, I'm not necessarily going to allow white women in that container right away, because we need our own spaces to feel safe to show up fully in our own vulnerability and to be witnessed by each other, right? So yes, I love to work with women of color who are overachievers, who are ready to finally enjoy and approach their lives from a place of pleasure and of sensuality. And something you brought up before was that, 1 out of 2 now, I think, has been sexually abused, women, and this goes beyond race. So we're also, as women of color, have not, there's a long history of us being hypersexualized, being viewed as like exotic, or I wonder if their pussy's different, or, there's, I'm forgetting her name right now, shame on me, but a Black woman who literally they treated her like an animal in a zoo, right? Because her ass was big. And they literally kept her genitals in a jar as if it was some kind of exotic thing afterwards. So there's a long history of Black bodies, Black women's bodies being used as experiments in the government. So part of the work I do is really deep inner child and womb work. And so much of that is really clearing sexual trauma, clearing sexual shame, and then starting to really reclaim that space that we can feel safe in our bodies. And I do that by using different modalities, breath, like you just took a breath, right? The breath, and then having safe spaces for us to tell our stories and see ourselves reflected back so that we know we don't have to hide the secrets. The secrets will kill you. Until we can really speak our truth and be witnessed, I don't care how much money you make. I don't care how much you achieve. You won't be able to really open up to the joy, the abundance, the well-being, the love that is your birthright. So, yeah, I don't know if I was clear, but that's the work I love to do.
How can these women of color who are watching this video now, how can they reach you, Diahnna, so that they can work with you?
Yes. So you can reach me via Facebook, Diahnna Nicole Baxter, or via Instagram at Diahnna Nicole. That's DIAHNNANICOLE. And you can also check my website out, DiahnnaNicoleBaxter.com. Currently, I have 3 spaces for one-on-one coaching, and then my Woman is Creator, Reclaim Your Destiny group program. That'll be coming up next month. So, and it's a really beautiful container where we infuse Kundalini yoga, breath work, as well as coaching in a safe space for us to really heal together.
Okay, do you work one-on-one with women of other races, or just one-on-one with?
No, I work with all women. Let me be clear about that. And I'm not closed off to men either. I think, if anything, like, the deep healing that needs to happen for the masculine and providing spaces for them to be able to be vulnerable is so important, you know? So yeah, my door is not closed to anyone. We jump on a call to see if we're a good fit, to see if I can truly serve you, and to see if you're truly willing to step into your power and into your life and into your divine destiny. So no, the doors are not closed for everyone. Yes.
Thank you, Diahnna. It has been a pleasure getting my butt kicked. I love it. You can kick my butt anytime. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for having this space. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for being honest. This is what we need. This is what we need. Yeah. You know, not being fearful of being called a racist or ignorant, like just speaking your truth so that we can start to chip away at what's really true and start to heal. So thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.